Good evening, Cherries fans. Good evening, Arsenal fans as well. I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot of you joining us as well on this show. Please do get involved. And good evening to the rest of the Premier League as well, who is probably wanting to find out the reaction to this game, and a bit of a crazy game as well. We didn't expect to be in the lead. We shall say that. Before we do welcome on our first guest, and the link is in the description for you, so please do get involved. We are live on Twitter, Facebook, and of course the YouTube channel. Here's a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. What they can do for you, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. So, shall we get this started then? By all means, please do get involved. All you need is the StreamYard link. It is in the description. All Bournemouth, all Arsenal, and all Premier League fans are welcome. But here's a man that everybody should recognise. It is a pleasure to welcome back on the show. Manny, how you doing, mate?
All good, mate, all good. And I have to say right now that even though I'm offline, hearing that music for the advertisement you put on always puts a smile on my face. I know I'm in for a relaxing and just all-round fun time.
Excellent stuff, mate. And yeah, lovely to have you back. Firstly, I think, of course, it says it in your name there as well. I think we do need to mention a very special fan of Arsenal who did sadly pass away last week.
Yes, the reason why I'm happy to mention his name is, of course, because it was through him and our channel that I got to meet you, and it was through you I got Pete's sake. Yeah, once again, we have a connection interruption. I hope you can hear me now.
Yep, I can hear you now.
So obviously, what happened with him and his condition, I think it's been fairly well documented, and it was a case of the decision being made to, just try and make him as comfortable as possible. So it was expected that he would leave us, but it's still very hurtful. It's especially hurtful for his family who doted over him, and despite knowing the severity of his condition, still were willing to leave no stone unturned to try to help him in any way. And for people like me who never had the pleasure of meeting him in person, but at least meeting him through the YouTube paradigm, it was certainly something that has shaken me a little bit, because it's another reminder, Craig, that life really is too precious, and football is really just a game at the best of times, and we really need to learn to respect one another and treat each other better, and leave our club rivalries and our team rivalries outside the door and have gentle discussions and sort of come to resolutions. That's one of the reasons why I enjoy coming on YouTube and doing these podcasts, and it's another reason why, despite not being a Cherries fan, I love coming on here, because I know that our discussions are going to be completely respectful. And I'm glad that at least by coming here as often as I can, I'm honoring my friend because it was through him that I got to know you, and long may that friendship continue.
Yep, most definitely. And our thoughts are with Stephen's family and friends at this moment in time. Of course, Manny, you are an Arsenal fan, and we had a conversation, didn't
Yes.
we, a little while back, about whether or not Arsenal can win the league. And I was very, very much positive. I was really positive for Arsenal because I saw, even in the first couple of games. Let's take it back to that game at Dean Court, the 3-0 win for Arsenal. I could see the quality that the side had then. And I called it then. I said, Arsenal have got a shout this season. Are you starting to believe it now?
Well, it's a loaded question, and it's going to have an even more loaded answer.
Go for it, mate.
Apparent, yeah, apparent. So I've actually read sort of a headline from the Daily Mail. I'm not too fond of that newspaper as an entity by itself. And Paul Merson, Magic Man, was quoted as saying that if we're able to win our next 3 games and end up being staying top of the league by Easter, then we almost certainly should be able to win. I think the problem is, though, Craig, that there are so many layers which come into this entire campaign. And thank you, Matthew.
Yeah,
Love that.
lovely, lovely message there from Matt.
Yeah, and yeah, obviously we started the season quite well. I think we only tasted our first defeat against Manchester United at Old Trafford, and it's like, you know, then obviously, like, I was thinking that although we did have a shout, I never really thought that we would possibly win. And there was so much to the way we were playing that although we certainly would start each game at more of a breakneck tempo, the questions would arise as to whether or not we'd be able to, maintain that tempo throughout the 90 minutes, how our record would be against the top 6 teams in the Premiership. Um, and I think so far, although we've done the double against Spurs, we have had somewhat spotty records against the likes of Manchester United and, of course, Manchester City. And we still have to play City at the Etihad, which is their home turf. So I think a lot of people were sort of excited about it, but I was one of those people who said the proof of everything will be at the end of the season. And bear in mind, Craig, that as Arsenal fans, we've been through so many seasons where under Arsene Wenger, we would set the early pace, be top of the table, and still remain top of the table going into the last few months of the season, only to see the wheels fall off. I'll give us credit in that we've never been top of the league for a long time since. In March for a long time since probably I want to say the Invincible season. I think on
Yep.
since then, of course, we haven't won, and the last time that we would be top for a longer period was, I believe, in 2007, 2008, when we were top going into February. At February, going into March, I believe. I think that was also the season where we were affected by the Martin Taylor horrific tackle on Eduardo, and
Mhm.
that was the match you could see where everything was starting to fall off with our then captain at the time, who would later go on to captain Tottenham of all things, William Gallas, throwing an
Yeah.
angry strop on the field, and it sort of set the team into a bit of a free fall. The fish always drops
Mhm.
from the head down, and if the captain doesn't compose himself well and conduct himself well, then obviously his teammates aren't going to really going to follow suit. So, in a nutshell, we've seen so many seasons where the team would flounder, and there's
Mhm.
always going to be this talk about how this time it's going to be different. But again, we still have to play a few teams that could
Mhm.
very well hold the Indian sign on us. And there are so many facets to it. City are still going to snap at our heels, given their
Mhm.
impressive win over Newcastle. It wasn't perfect by any means, and you and I were chatting about that on WhatsApp, but they still got
Yeah.
the very threatening and play them at Anfield, believe it or not. and Newcastle as well under a certain Edward Howe. Yeah, I was talking about Eddie Howe.
Yep.
His team came to the Emirates and stifled us, and we have to go to St James's Park, where the atmosphere will be absolutely rocking, and where it will not be easy to get 3 points over there. Mark my words. So there's still so much to go, and I don't want to be one of those people who will, completely celebrate and say this team is the real deal, and we're going to win, and then end up, having the apple cart upset. Last season, we were on our way to the Champions League. We had games in hand and a point advantage over Tottenham, and we all know what happens. So it's not going to be over until the fat lady sings. But I think a lot of fans will tell you that she has started to clear the air a little bit.
Hello, Manny.
Yeah, yeah. I was saying
It
it
keeps
isn't over
breaking
until
up.
the fat lady sings, but I think we have to change that. It's not going to be over until the late great Pavarotti clears his throat. Apologies to all women out there.
Yeah, no problem. Well, we do have some comments here. So, Yomi, thank you for joining us, Yomi. Of course, he did watch our show with Turkish on AFTV, box to box. So it's absolutely amazing to be on AFTV. I think it's what all channels aspire to be. So maybe one day we'll get to that sort of level. Um, Evening to Arsenal, the history and more as well. And of course,
Ah,
Joel. There's a lot of love for you in the comments as well, Manny. Manny sent me here,
yeah, I actually,
Joel.
yeah, I actually did inform everyone that I'd be coming on the show to talk, and if they wanted the link, I could DM the link to them. But yeah, I mean, if they wish to come, I mean, I'm sure they're all welcome. I've told them a lot of good
Of
things about
course.
you lot.
Yep, thank you so much. And the Mittenmeister, welcome to the show, mate. And has arrived from AFTV. So, and of course, Doug, who we'll be having a chat with, no doubt, before the Liverpool game. I think Doug's quite happy today, don't you?
Oh,
Yes.
Doug's not going to be the only one. Seventh heaven, of
Well, there
course.
you go. So,
Yeah, all I'm
yes.
going to say, Doug, if you're watching this, mate, all I'm going to say is please go easy on us. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Please, I don't want another 9-0. To be honest, next week. To be honest, I can't imagine that happening, because let's look. Because the last time we were speaking about AFC Bournemouth, Manny, we was talking about how we are not so much. We were concerned. We were concerned, and mainly the reason behind that was that, of course, Gary O'Neill was coming under a lot of pressure, a lot of stick for his decisions, and the decisions that I feel that were wrong of going too defensive. So he did it against Brighton. He did it against Forest. Against Forest, of course, we were 1-0 up, conceded, got a point. Brighton was even worse, where we conceded and of course come away with nothing, even though probably were the better side in that game. But it's ran a little bit deeper than that as well against Spurs and Leeds. Personally, I don't feel that this defeat is in that same category. Now I know that I don't know if you've seen the social media postings, Manny, from a lot of Bournemouth fans. There's a lot of people turning around and saying that Gary O'Neill should still go after that result. Um, but that's not in the same category as those results that I mentioned there. Which,
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that after you earned that win over the Wolves at Molineux, it was just
yeah,
unfortunate that your run-in dictated that you had to play Manchester City and then us. And of course, now you've got Liverpool. So it's as if the football gods have made it very clear that the Cherries have got to be the ones to beat. And what strikes me a great deal, I really was able to see the Arsenal Bournemouth game at least in almost its entirety. I think I couldn't catch the first few minutes of the second half, but mostly I didn't miss anything. Is that
Mhm.
you really started to show how well you could play. The thing is, though, Craig, I do remember that chat you had with Turkish, and you were talking about how instead of playing a back five, you wanted to see Gary O'Neill revert to a back four with
Mhm.
Jack Stevens and Senesi in the centre of the defence, with Chris Mepham not really being in there. And so one of the things I remember talking to you about was the fact that once again, O'Neill went for a back five with both Mepham and
Mhm.
Stevens playing. And you did mention that set pieces would have been your Achilles heel, and so Mepham wouldn't have been best suited for that necessarily. But
Mhm.
it was wonderful, of course, to see how well Mepham was defending, and Stevens also was in the thick of things. And I think what
Yeah.
really struck me was that although you only had one person up front in Solanke, the midfield
Mhm.
actually did a really good job in sort of catching us cold. And that also highlighted the fallacy, in my opinion, of Arteta opting to play once again Alexander Zinchenko as more of an auxiliary left back slash centre defensive midfielder, where he tries to be dynamic and does both roles, but sadly, more often than not, goes a little bit walkabout and leaves that defensive area
Mhm.
completely uncovered. So that came through the right, terrific cross. Saliba and Partey were sort of, you know, statuesque, if you will. They were caught
Yeah.
napping, and then Philip lived up to his billing, pun intended, slotted it past the ex-Cherry Aaron Ramsdale, and you were 1-0 up with not even 10 seconds on the
I
clock.
couldn't
And
believe
then the
that.
way you were able to.
It was just the way that had come off the training ground. And I know that so many people and so many fans have knocked Gary O'Neill. He's taken that off the training ground. He's brought in a player in Atara, Dongo Atara, who, Burkina Faso international.
Yes.
Um, hadn't really heard that much about him, but was part of a very successful Lorient team. And he's just walked into this side, and it was pinpoint perfect. To be honest, the ball from Rothwell over to Dongo was fantastic. And then Dongo's cross in was, again, pinpoint perfect. And of course, Solanke's, dodged it. So it goes through to Billing. That is, outstanding. And I don't know if you remember, I mentioned that goal that we scored against Fulham up at Craven Cottage, and that was so
Yep.
similar in the technicality of what we did. Again, it was a very quick goal that we scored at Craven Cottage, but I think there's got to be a lot of credit to Gary O'Neill for that, hasn't there?
He does deserve some credit. Don't get me wrong. I mean, obviously, it
Mm,
seems clear that he has his finger on the pulse tactically of what to do and sort of how to sort of achieve that. And that was almost similar to how Sean Dyche was able to completely strangle us at Goodison Park, where he had his five midfielders sort of double teaming Martin Odegaard and really, sort of strangling him. And I can't say the word strangling, but sort of stifling him rather,
yeah,
not allowing him to do his thing. And we were just basically caught cold because I think it was a question of complacency, given that we were, playing Bournemouth, who weren't exactly doing too well, but then we just got caught napping. But what I will say to your credit is that instead of floundering under the relentless pressure that we exerted, you actually hit us brilliantly on the counter attack on more than a few occasions. You mentioned
yeah.
Atara; he could have had a goal himself, only for Ramsdale to come up with an important save. And the commentators, though, I think it was F. Anakoku and was it Jim Proudfoot? I don't remember. Maybe it
Yeah.
was. They were saying that when that pass was made by Billing into the penalty area, I think maybe the direction wasn't quite right. The timing was a little bit off. So when I think Solanke sort of tried to, dummy that as well, and it worked almost perfectly. But when
Mhm.
Otara got it, I think his positioning was quite off a little bit. So yeah, the save was still good, but if things had been slightly different, we could have been 2-0 down. And of course, we ended up going 2-0 down through Senesi, who did brilliantly to evade Party again, who didn't cover himself with glory, and had an absolute bullet past the ex-Cherry goalkeeper, and it was 2-0. I think there was some talk about Gary wanting to bring on the ex-Arsenal youth player Jaden Anthony. He never made a senior appearance for us, but I believe he played extensively in the youth team, so he will know some of our Hale End youngsters like Reece Nelson and Eddie Nketiah. And I remember you saying that you would have been more fearful of Eddie Nketiah being in the
Yeah.
team than actually Leandro Trossard. And of course, Trossard had to go off with an injury to be replaced by another of our Hale End boys, Emile Smith Rowe. There's a
Mhm.
part of me that thinks, Craig, that if O'Neill had actually been on the button and actually made that substitution after that goal, then maybe it would have enabled you to have that balance between being too defensive, but also having more of an attacking threat, especially with
Yeah.
someone who could hold the ball up. It could have been either Anthony or Kiefer Moore, and maybe um, Gary was thinking that Jaden would be the man for the job, and it was nice to see Jaden coming back to play at the Emirates, even if he didn't make a senior appearance for us. I just think, again, it was also a question of, and you were telling me this, you couldn't afford to be too defensive, you couldn't afford to tighten up. But sadly, I think, as with Aston Villa, I think they completely had a muddled strategy. It was as if, you know, I don't know what it is with teams who just don't seem to have the confidence and the belief that they really can grind out a win at times. And that's probably what I saw a little bit with Bournemouth. And then you were telling me that when we pulled one back, that it was almost inevitable that we would score. I'll tell you one thing though: when Reece Nelson scored that winner, I mean, there was a part of me that was relieved that after all of that we got the 3 points. But as I told you, mate, I was choked for you because
Mhm.
we were not good value for our performance in the first half. Although we did create some chances with Neto pulling off a wonderful double save from, I believe, Odegaard and Saka, and he
Mhm.
looked magisterial. The commentator's curse struck. Neto had a sort of a punch away, and then he wasn't exactly, covering himself well for Party's first goal. I thought he had pulled off a worldie to stop Ben White's shot from going in, but it turned out it had crossed the line anyway. And it was as if things started to, sort of choke in the big moments. And I think that is something that a lot of teams, if they want to try to beat us, are going to have to learn to manage. They've got to manage the big
Mhm.
moments a lot better. And other teams, of course, have prevented us from taking the 3 points this season. So I think, really, to be honest, it's nothing more than some good fortune in many ways.
Mhm.
But in addition, I think had O'Neill been a little bit more proactive with his substitutions and made those changes to help the team maintain a little bit of pressure, but also be a little bit more fluid defensively, then that defeat could have been avoided. Maybe he could have brought off Chris Mepham, who had had a really good game, and brought on
Mhm.
another midfielder. And I believe he brought on he made some other substitutions. I think there was also a like for like substitution when Zamora was replaced by Fredericks, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
So clearly there were some attempts to make those changes, but I guess it was a question of Arsenal ending up having our substitutions being made. And again, people credit Arteta for making the key substitution of Reece Nelson for Emile
Mhm.
Smith Rowe. But again, it was brought about by a necessity because ESR had to go off injured once again. And
Mhm.
I wonder if this is going to be the last time we'll see him at the club, poor chap. Lovely fella,
Mhm.
terrific, all a wonderful talent. But the biggest fear is that he could end up being yet another Jack Wilshere.
Mhm.
Again, also played for Bournemouth, as you well know.
Yeah, definitely. Well, welcome to the show, Lamar. Thank you so much. I believe you come over from Arsenal Fan TV, so thank you for joining us. Um, of course, comment here from Matt. We did have it on the screen. Uh, the opening 9 seconds was beautifully executed training ground move that paid off. Credit to the team and staff, but there will need to be a few more of them to keep us up. And we did. Matt did put on here as well. We need to take 3 points from Leeds, West Ham, Leicester, Saints to have a chance of staying up. It will go all the way to the wire at Everton, where we'll need 3 points on the last day. Now, I'm I'm not so sure about that because personally, I don't think Everton will be able to stay up themselves on the last day of the season. Now that's my theory because I think Everton will go down before that. Um, I agree with Leeds. We have to beat the teams around us. The Leeds, West Ham, Leicester, Saints. I do wonder. Of course, we've got to go to Crystal Palace as well. Now, if we was to beat the four that Matt has said there, taking away Everton plus Crystal Palace, that's 15 points. Will that be enough considering how close it is this season? It's not a season where some teams cut adrift. I don't think any team, are going to be cut adrift this season because we've seen with Saints, they looked the most likely and then they've gone and got a result against Leicester. I think Leicester themselves could end up in that bottom three at the end of the season. Do you think that 5 wins should do it?
Well, I'm going to answer your question in a more loaded way by looking up your complete run-in because I think it's only 4 games that Matt has mentioned. Obviously, if we take a look at the immediate run-in,
There's the four
in
there:
addition,
Leeds, West Ham,
yes,
Leicester, Saints.
yes,
But of course, Everton last game of the season, so that would be the fifth one. But I think it could be done before the Everton game, and I think Everton will go down beforehand.
yeah, and the last game of the run-in as shown on BBC Sport will see you hosting Leeds. So there is Southampton,
Hmm.
Leeds, West Ham, and before that Leicester City. In between, you've got several teams who are above you in the table.
Yeah.
You have beaten Aston Villa before 2-0 at the
Yes.
beginning of the season. That was, of course, against an Aston Villa team that was simply unable to get their act together under
Hmm.
Steven Gerrard. And it was when Unai Emery came in, who, of course, used to be our manager, Unai Emery, that the team have started to become a little bit more solid and start to find a bit of a purpose and identity about their play. And they also had a dreadful mini slump in form when they had an inexplicable 4-2 loss at home to Leicester. Were
Hmm.
expected to cast aside by Manchester City. And then, of course, they had a similar game to you against us at Villa Park, where they went up twice, went ahead twice, 1-0 and 2-1, and were looking very good, but then all of a sudden seemed to go into a shell. I actually thought that they were suffering from a case of imposter syndrome throughout those 3 games. Because maybe they were just wondering, are we really good enough to take 3 points given the way we performed recently? And, they ended up losing their shape. Zinchenko equalized. Rather unfortunate own goal by the ex-Arsenal goalkeeper, Emi Martinez, who I still rate very highly. Thank you to all those top gooners. And then, of course, Martinez thought that he could take a risk and become prime Peter Schmeichel, but sadly that risk didn't go too well, and then they ended up losing 4-2. But they've staunched the bleeding a bit with a victory over Everton at Goodison, and of course a home win over Crystal Palace.
Hmm.
So I take a look at this next game being against Liverpool, and obviously I think the first thing that O'Neill will have to do will be to organise the defence and sort of decide that with attack being the best form of defense, the days of the back five should now be over. And he was playing a 4-4-2 for the most part at several stages during the middle of the season. So, as you've suggested, Craig, he might have to possibly, you know, rest Chris Mepham, tough on the Welshman, but sometimes you've got to do what you have to do, especially if, as you've said, you want to protect the team from set pieces. And, with the likes of Salah and company now back in devastating form, set pieces will be all the rage. And don't forget, of course, Trent Alexander Arnold, who takes their set pieces. And 2 at the top. It could be Solanke or Anthony, or maybe Billing can come up there and join him, and you could bring another midfielder in back to the 4-4-2. They're still playing a 4-3-3, which could give them a little bit of width, but whoever you decide to play at left back, and I thought Zamora had an outstanding game for the most part before
Yeah.
he was taken off. He could possibly have a role to play when it comes to trying to defend against Mohamed Salah. And then the other games that have been mentioned, um, Villa they also have some weaknesses, but I think Emery has now focused a lot more on tightening the defense. But you could possibly, get a point if you're able to keep Ollie Watkins, Leon Bailey, and their midfield quiet. And then, of course, there's Fulham, who have done well this season,
Yeah.
but also can be contained. Brighton under De Zerbi can certainly spring a few surprises with their attack. They've let go of several players, including Trossard, who's come to us, and they're still able to produce some decent performances. Leicester certainly have undergoing a crisis in confidence, and Tottenham, let's not forget them. They're actually there for the taking, mind you, especially in light of their result at Molineux, where you lot actually got 3 points. So they failed where you succeeded. And that's another example of the topsy-turvy nature of this league. I wouldn't necessarily say that Arsenal are completely are at the top completely due to their own merit. It's a question of several teams at the top having had dreadfully inconsistent seasons. But this is also the time, eerily enough, when several of these teams are now coming back to the fore and really trying to show their quality. Although with Spurs, given the injuries that they've had, they seem to be, going nowhere fast. And it might be time for a new manager. It might be time for several players to be offloaded. So, in addition to these four games, I'd like to see you a lot try to be a little bit more positive and take that
Yeah.
positivity from the Arsenal game to to this run in. Just make a few changes to the defense, pack the midfield a little bit with four, and provide two people up front. It could be either Jaden Anthony or Kiefer Moore, and then Bob could be your uncle.
Well, exactly. And of course, Spurs, again, got another defeat. Um, you know, there's no reason why we can't get a result against them.
No,
You
there
know,
isn't.
you never know. So we shall see. But fingers crossed, mate. Hopefully, we can get enough points to get over the line. And I don't want it to go to that last game against Everton because, yeah, we do have a fairly good track record against Everton, but we don't want to risk that, to be honest.
No, you don't. And of course, they played earlier today, and they took a good 2-1 lead. I
Hmm.
mean, they actually led Forest twice, I believe, through Gray and Decore, only for
Hmm.
Johnson to equalise on both occasions. So I think they've also showed under Sean Dyche that they can certainly play well enough to take some leads, and we all remember our defeat to them at Goodison. I just think that as well, they may also are having a little bit of a confidence issue. I think the lower you are on the table, it seems to me, the lower you are on the table, the less self belief you have that you can actually, really, really grind that result. And I think the only way to sort of, get over that hump is to just focus on the next game and take everything you've learnt from that game. Keep all the positives and try and change the negatives, and just see how it goes. And I think now, for what it's worth, you're at a stage where you just got to go for everything. So whatever changes O'Neill makes, hopefully they will pay off. And if he keeps you up, then he will have definitely earned his new contract. And I would love to see Bournemouth staying up. I have several people who are telling me that Bournemouth are absolutely rubbish. They're shambolic. They should go down. But when you're able to produce performances like that, those are the types of performances that make people like myself think, Jesus Christ, I hope this team stays up. And there are some other teams in the relegation zone who, quite frankly, deserve to be in the relegation zone.
Yeah.
And for them, you just think, the jig is up. I think there's no hope for them. And yet, even then, we've seen teams that were so hopelessly marooned at the foot of the table at one stage somehow find a huge second wind and come up. So nothing is predictable. All you can do, mate, is control what you can control.
Well, just a couple more. Matt's put Neto again superb yesterday. Could have all been different if Rambo hadn't pulled off that great save from a Bournemouth break. Shame Dongo couldn't finish. It is spelled Dango, but it is pronounced Dongo, believe it or not. Dongo Tara. And somebody was going to bring it up. Actually, Stephen Dyer, I did see that you did pop into the room very, very briefly. So feel free to jump back on if you can get back on. I'm not sure. It might have been internet connection issues, but um, please do come back. But right, somebody was going to mention it, wasn't it? And Paul from Australia, hope you're well, mate. Hope you will discuss the unexplainable 6 minutes of injury time. Go on, Manny.
Yeah,
Take it
to be
away.
honest, mate. First of all, good day to you. It is morning over there where you are. I don't know if you're on the side where you have Melbourne, Brisbane, and Sydney, or if you're on the other side where you might have Perth. So obviously there is a time difference of an hour between those areas. But good morning to you indeed. And to be honest, I mean, I was actually so focused on just watching the game in particular and trying to make sure the game was seen out to its conclusion that. I knew that there would be sickness because there were more than a few stoppages with several players, falling down injured. And it's also another lesson that to try and defend a two all tie with minutes to go by just trying to stop the flow of the play, it doesn't quite work against Arsenal. And it was a case of lightning striking twice again for first against Aston Villa and now against Bournemouth. So I think there were just far too many injuries, and uh, that was one of the reasons why they decided to offer 6 minutes of injury time. And there has been, of course, a lot of talk about how the approach from the World Cup could be adopted, by which you know you could say, considering what could happen in injury time again, more minutes could possibly be added. I'm not too sure. And obviously, the referee felt compelled to play the extra minute of injury time in lieu of some stoppages there. And that was when Nelson scored that absolute corker. And Ray, is that you, sir?
Oh, hello, Stephen. You're right.
Yeah,
Oh,
hi
my bad.
boys. Sorry, yeah, I was half asleep.
Yeah, no,
Sorry
that's
about
all
that.
right.
Re-
Yeah.
I
I was
think
I was reliving I was reliving yesterday. Just it's so disappointing. Hi Craig, how you doing? Hi Manny.
Yeah, all good, all good. Yeah, carry on with the 6 minutes then.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
So I think. Mhm.
I wasn't
Go,
at the
no,
game. But go on, Manny. You know more about it than I do. Do you think it was just 7-8 minutes at the end, wasn't it?
it was 7 minutes, and it was enough time, obviously, for what happened, to happen. And I think it was a question of maybe the referees trying to just make sure that everything would be taken into account. Normally, I'm not one to argue with the referee's decisions. And again, if there are some stoppages and stoppage time, then they have to be taken into account at the referee's discretion. They also have to take into consideration whether or not players are deliberately trying to waste time or run down the clock. And, it was just unfortunate what happened. And I think it might be another example again of the referees once again learning to. I think Lamar said at the time wasting was crazy. So clearly, Lamar's made it crystal clear that actions do have consequences, and if you try to time waste, you ask for trouble. And this was where, again, Craig, we talk about all the ifs and buts that happened. If O'Neill had made a substitution immediately after Senesi's goal, then maybe things would have been quite different. Instead, the same formation was sort of allowed to sort of rest a bit, and then Arsenal kept coming at you, and it happened the way it did. Now back to the question again. I think it was just a question of injuries and a few other issues as well. There was a passage of play where Neto was on the ground and complaining that he was fouled. He ended up getting booked. I think it was just one of those few things which weren't quite in your favour yesterday, but. Sometimes it is what it is. The referees and officials have to do the job the way they see fit. But I think there will be some people who will complain that maybe it was a little bit too much, and I think the longer it went, the more Bournemouth were under the cosh, and it was only a matter of time. And I'll tell you what, when Nelson had that space and had that ball, I almost knew in my heart what was going to happen. And it's still as relieving as it was for me, putting myself in your shoes, Craig and Stephen. That was an absolute choker. And Stephen, I'll come to you now, sir.
Yeah, I just feel that the squads, the quality, the history of Arsenal, the history of all the clubs in the Premier League, and we're Bournemouth. We've got a hell of a lot of catching up to do. Not necessarily this season, but on and off the pitch. I mean, the training academy, they're talking about the ground and everything. I mean, I've lived in London for 7 years, and I used to go to Arsenal, the good old North Bank and the Clock End and everything like that in the mid 80s, early 80s. And you were getting 35, 40,000 then. We weren't getting that at Bournemouth in those days. It's just, we're just playing catch up all the time at the moment, on and off the pitch. Yes, we got an owner, but he needs to spend millions and to get up into the top 10 of the Premier League. I know Brighton have done it. Brentford are doing really well now, and Crystal Palace are going through a dodgy spell. But they've all, from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they've had their ups and downs, but they've always had that good fan support. They've always had good, bigger stadiums than ours. Even without the telly money back in the 80s, they've had that money to invest all the time, and we haven't. And there's plenty of sides that haven't. Wolves, another traditional, great side in the 70s and 80s, into Europe. And I just feel that Bournemouth are always catching up. Yes, we had a great transfer window, and I still believe that we can stay up. I think yesterday, in my heart of my hearts, I wish we got thrashed 4-5-0, because yesterday we were so close to having a great result. And that's down to the hard work over the last few weeks. And I go onto these podcasts and listen to people, and Gary Neal does get a few mistakes wrong, playing five at the back and not attacking and this and that. But to be a Bournemouth fan now, you can't complain of
Oh,
what's happening.
we,
We've got a
we,
great investment. Enjoy the ride. That's what it is.
we can't moan at all because,
No,
let's be honest, this football club has been known, and to be honest, there's only one other team in the Premier League currently who you could turn around and say, and to be honest, they were normally in a higher league than us, but we did encounter them more than most, and that's Brentford.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's Brentford. And, of course, they've recently got their stadium. That's what we need to aspire to do next. And I think that's going to be on Bill Foley's radar. But, we're sharing a pitch and with the players that we were yesterday and competing with those players. And there's so much. Stephen, I'll throw it out to you because, of course, I come under a lot of criticism for my support of Gary O'Neill. Now, I really, really like Gary. I've met him in person, and he's such a bright young manager. Those words, bright young manager. He's not the finished article. He's going to get things wrong. But are you completely behind him, or do you think this job is probably a little bit too big for him as it stands? Or, are you like me thinking, well, he's done bloody well, really,
yeah.
considering what
I
he
would,
inherited?
if we go down, I would have him for next season without a shadow.
Hmm.
It'd be interesting to see, if we go down, how many players can stay, depicting what their contracts say,
Yeah.
and the internationals that probably won't get, they need to further their career. I can understand
Hmm.
players wanting to leave, but I would keep him. I don't, but there's nobody else. I mean, really, look, West Ham, Moyes might be going. So who are they going to get? Like,
Well,
they can have Benitez or somebody like that, but it's only short term. I think Gary Neal is a good up and coming manager like you, Craig. I'm in your camp. I think nurture him. Yes, we go down. We've got a really good, strong possibility of coming back up. Maybe not straight away, 2 or 3 seasons, but the money is there. The
yeah.
money is there to keep us in the Championship. We're not going to do a Pompey. We're not going to do a Sunderland. We're there. We got great future. Maybe the ground might take a back step, but we can certainly go on with the training academy and bring in some good quality players. So it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, it's like, we all like to stay in the Premier League and maybe next season, get into the top 10, top 12, top 15. But I just, to be a Bournemouth fan now after I've supported them for about 50 odd years. It's a great, going to places like Arsenal. Bloody hell, you would never thought
It's
of that
amazing.
10, 15 years ago.
After Carlisle Way and places like that,
Yeah,
and of
yeah,
course, in that running for the Great Escape, when we was on -17, um, the penultimate game before the Grimsby match, we went to Chester City away, a club that doesn't even exist no more.
yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah,
I know that's awful to say because it's quite sad because nobody wants to see a football club go out of business, but that is exactly where we've come from, and I think we've got to remember that as a fan base because it's remarkable. I still, though, Stephen, I still think we can do it, but I
yeah.
think it's going to be close.
After yesterday, I really felt. Do you think the Forest and the Everton was a good draw for us then? I think either one of them winning, but a point is a point, isn't it? That's all you
To
get.
be honest, I was quite happy that they both drew.
Yeah, I
Um,
think so. I was as well. Yeah,
I think
yeah,
Everton, even though they were 2-1 up, of the two sides, they're they're going to be definitely more in danger. I think they're definitely more in danger. I think that they have got a Dyche way of playing, and they've got
yeah.
one way of playing, and teams, will pick up. And I think they will really struggle to stay up. I think Forest
Well,
might be okay.
my dream is Southampton, Leeds, and Everton to go down.
Do you know what? They could well go like that but I think we have got a chance, and the reason being is play like that up at Villa Park. We've got a chance
Yeah,
against Aston Villa.
yeah,
Southampton, we should beat them playing like that. Leicester, we should beat them. Leeds, we should beat them. Um, you look Crystal Palace, Fulham. There's enough winnable games, in there. Leicester, did I mention them as well? Oh, West
yeah.
Ham, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
West
yeah.
Ham was the other one.
Going back to Gary O'Neill though. I mean, it must be daunting to come out and you've got to do your press conferences. He's probably thinking, oh, I can't be. I don't want to do this.
Hmm.
But over time, you'll get experienced about it, and you'll be saying a few things, and you'll probably get boring because Eddie Howe is good with the press, but he's a bit boring. He's so
Well, that's
takes
one of the
experience as well in the
criticisms.
press room.
That was
Yeah,
one of the criticisms of Gary O'Neill was how he actually responded to the questions. And, when he was asked if he thought he'd get something from Arsenal, he said no. And personally, I think you can't judge a manager on a press conference. Um,
no, that's right.
Personally, from meeting with Gary O'Neill, and I might be wrong here. I don't personally think he likes the spotlight. I don't think he likes to stand there in front of a camera talking about the match. I don't think it comes comfortable to him. However, one thing I can say is, he got that first goal straight off the training ground. It was pinpoint perfect from
Yeah,
Rothwell's pass out to Dongo Tara, and that cross in was outstanding. Now, if you got, one of the top right midfielders in the world, you name one, you got them and they did that, people would be hailing that because
yeah,
it was that good. It was that good. And I think Gary is getting there. And I think he will make more mistakes, but I think he's doing the right things. And
yeah. And the players are playing for him.
yeah,
Yeah, they seem to be all for him. So what more can you do? It's like you say, his tactics. He needs to look at that and everything. And I don't know. Maybe he should have somebody a bit more experienced with him. That's an argument that's been on here before, but
mhm.
I don't know. I mean, I
Well,
certainly wouldn't. I wouldn't recommend anybody like a Harry Redknapp or anything like that. A little bit old school now. that somebody, but who is there? Who would want to do that? I don't
Well,
know.
I do keep mentioning one name, but to be honest, everybody probably knows who that name is. I've said it several times on here before, so I won't say it. Well, Carlos Corberán. Personally, I think the West Brom manager would be good, but you can't change a manager at this point. Would you agree, Manny?
no, I wouldn't.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Craig, we did have this discussion when I was there with Ryan Mather from Huddersfield Town Fan TV. He obviously had nothing but the best things to say about Corberan. But again, at this particular stage, to ask him to leave his job at West Brom and then come over to Dean Court at this stage of the season, when things are going well, it would have been one thing if the Baggies had decided to, part ways with him, but they haven't done that. And so that would really only prove disruptive, not only to the Baggies, but also to the Cherries. And I don't think you need any of that sort of disruption, particularly at this stage of the season. I think another reason why people are so worried, Craig, is that, when people talk about the performances against teams like Manchester City, after conceding those 4 goals, you went all out and got one back. And of course, against us, you were actually really good value for a lot more than just no points. You deserved at least one. And I wouldn't have had any complaints if you had gotten all 3, but things didn't work out the way they did. I think a lot of fans are saying, you know what, you can't just Bailey Francis, big up to you. And he's an Aston Villa fan. I've done some streams with him, and I'm sure that in the run up to that match, the two of you will have a really good chinwag and a lot to say. So
Most
that'll be
definitely.
interesting. That'll be interesting indeed. And I think fans just don't want to be clutching at straws. They want to actually see things sort of materialize. So let's say, for example, you come up against Liverpool next in the red hot form in which they're in. I mean, can you imagine? I switched off the telly after they scored 4, then they put another 3 past Manchester United. And oh my goodness. And memories, of course, of the 9-0 will still be raw in your minds.
Yes.
I think it's going to be, I think a lot of a lot of it will depend on how well Gary motivates the boys, saying, you know what, you lost 9-0 to them, but you showed a lot of character since then. You've really turned it around. You need to show these people that you are not going to be bullied or cowed by them, and that you're going to take the fight to them. And I think you agree with me, Craig, and you definitely agree with me as well, Mr. Dyer, that when Bournemouth have started to, be a little bit more brave and courageous, other teams wouldn't really like it. So
I think we get off to a good start and the crowd get behind it. I think that would be. I feel quite positive for the Liverpool game. I'm not saying we're going to win it, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get a draw if we play like we did. I don't know who's going to come back, Craig, with Lerma, or I don't know how long they're out for.
I believe it's
Lewis Cook,
about a
obviously.
sickness. So
Is it?
hopefully, fingers crossed, it will just be a couple of days. So, we shall see. Just a quick comment here by Lamar. Paul aren't great this year. The Arsenal performance should inspire you guys to go for it. Yes, Lamar. To be honest, I think we need. It'd be nice to get the revenge on Liverpool for that day because I was there. It was bloody painful, to be perfectly honest. It was. It was just so disappointing. And of course, I spoke to Chris Sutton and Robbie Savage on the way back and said Parker had to go because of the comments. It was just the way we sat back. We allowed Liverpool just to play in front of us. They were just picking us off with ease. Okay, give a player a yard of space to make it difficult for them, but don't give them 5 yards like what we did that day. We just sat back and waited for Liverpool to come at us, and it was only going to go one way. To be honest, we did it in the first 10 minutes against Arsenal at Dean Court. And it's very. That was such a disappointing day.
Well, it's not the first time it's happened, is it? With Leeds and Tottenham as well. So.
Well, that's the thing. Question for you, Stephen, and I did say to Manny at the start of the show and asked him this question: would you, thinking about the Leeds, the Spurs, and also I'd throw in there the Nottingham Forest draw and also the Brighton defeat, where we, for the last 10 minutes, sat back, sat too deep, and of course conceded in both of those games. Would you put this result against Arsenal, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the two best teams in the league? Personally, I think Arsenal will win the league, but would you put that in the same category as those ones?
Yeah, I probably would. Yeah, yeah. I think it was a good display, all by. Yeah, yeah. You can argue the toss. Did we score too early? Maybe
Yeah.
we. I mean, when I saw it come through, not after 9 seconds, I thought, oh, good. Now we're going to sit back and Arsenal will have 99%. I couldn't pick it up on my phone. I just switched off and went for a walk with the dog. I just couldn't listen to it through Chris Temple or anybody. I thought, no, we're going to get battered and battered and battered and battered. And then when I last looked, it was 2-0. I thought, bloody hell, what's going on here? Then I listened to it. It's just such a shame and just such a annoying. I don't know. I just feel so ups and downs. Like I said, I wish we got beat 4 or 5-0 comprehensively, but it just gives us more hope for the rest of the season. That's the way I look at it. It's just, can we do Liverpool? We play like that. We might have one or two players. You might change the team around a little bit, but for me, yesterday gave me so much hope because I didn't want. I was listening to the West Ham fan podcast after the Brighton game, and the boys weren't playing for Moyes at all. But yesterday, a Bournemouth side turned up and put their bodies there. It was, and scored 2 goals. It was just so refreshing.
And I think that is the big thing for me, is that the team are playing for Gary O'Neill. It was always going to be difficult to stay up this season, and he's come under so much criticism. I've come under so much criticism because I've been supportive of him, but I think it's worked for us before. Hiring within. Look at Eddie Howe. Look at that. That's the biggest example you could come with. But I think, I think we'll be okay. I think we'll be okay, and I think, it's going to be a case that we'll scrape it this season, and just have to build for next year.
Yeah.
But we need to replicate that performance. We can't go back to the Southampton performance, for example. The last 20 minutes against Leeds. We have to replicate that against Arsenal, because if we play like that again, I think we've got, every chance of beating these teams. Bailey has put, I think Bournemouth will go down, unfortunately, but we have you in 2 weeks. We should beat you. See, I'm not sure. I'm not so sure. But then again, this is an Aston Villa side, which is very, very different to the Aston Villa side we played at the start of the season, like you said, Manny.
Exactly, and I did mention, of course, that under Steven Gerrard, the team just wasn't able to get its act together, and they were, at one point in a relegation dogfight themselves before. Under Unai Emery, they've gotten their act together, and even after that mini blip of 3 games where they went through an imposter syndrome, they've gotten their act together completely. Just said enough's enough. We have to get these wins by any which way, and they've gotten them. So. I think what Emery is going to do is try and make sure that he will focus a lot more on keeping the defence a little bit more watertight. And obviously, with a world champion goalkeeper behind them dictating play, that shouldn't be too difficult. And then, of course, their midfield will certainly look to try to move things around. I believe Coutinho's injured, so that takes away a little bit of the dynamism, but they've still got some more than decent options. Left back could be a weakness because neither Alex Moreno nor Lucas Digne are necessarily convincing. Bailey's just said that he could possibly come on for a few minutes to speak about that. So I'll probably want to wait for him, but I will sort of provide a preamble. And of course, they're going to lean quite heavily on Ollie Watkins and Leon Bailey up front. They sold Danny Ings to West Ham, despite the fact that he was their leading goal scorer. I think it's because Emery has decided that, as good a servant as Ings has been, it's time to move forward with some younger players and possibly, just try and take things forward from there. And maybe next season, if he can keep them at least in the top half of the table, potentially challenging for Europe by the end of the season, they could make the Conference League or even the Europa League. They could end up, strengthening the squad with one or two more strategic purchases. And one thing about Emery is that he's a manager who definitely knows what he wants. And at least Aston Villa is showing signs that they are willing to back him in the way that Arsenal weren't able or willing to do so. So it will be a difficult game, but I think a lot's going to hinge, really, Craig, on the Liverpool game and how you approach that and how you play. And you're going to want to try and take the approach against us and the approach against Liverpool to the rest of the season and try and test that against Unai Emery and his lot. And, if you can give Aston Villa a game, they're not going to quite like it up them. And they're also going to try and look to get as many points as they can, because they will also want to, they'll fancy themselves, mind you, to be challenging for Europe themselves. And so they're not going to want to have a slip up against the Cherries.
Yeah, definitely. And
it's a bit interesting game, actually. And there again, you've got a really experienced manager against a bit of a novice. So that'd be interesting.
With regards,
boys, thank you very much, Craig. I'm gonna shoot off. Manny,
gonna head off.
See you and talk to you. All the best,
Always. Take care of yourself.
Thanks so much, Stephen, and thank you for joining us again.
Up the Cherries.
All the best, mate.
As always, up the Cherries.
And we do have Bailey with us. How you doing, Bailey?
Thanks for having me on, mate. It is the first time I've been on your channel.
Yeah, no problem. Pleasure to have you on. So, of course, an Aston Villa fan. We've got you in a couple of weeks' time at Villa Park. Talk to me about that defeat at Dean Court, though, at the start of the season. How has it all changed since Unai Emery has been in charge there?
Yeah, of course, we did play it earlier in the season, and of course, we always lose against promotion teams anyway. We always lose against you as well. We never have a really good respect against you. But yeah, of course, at the start of the season with Steven Gerrard, did not go downhill. I said to all Villa fans at the start, do you even want this clown? Do you want him near our club? But he came, Villa fans said, let's just give him a chance. He's going to get us Europa League. And look, what happened? I was right. Do you want this? Do you want him in my squad team? And yeah, of course, he did get sacked after that. Disappointing Fulham result when we got battered 3-0. What? I think that was a really boring game, to be fair. I don't think we was good, but I don't think they was. I think that red card in that game let us down. What was even a red card, in my opinion. But yeah, however, we came in, of course. Of course, we did lose against Leicester and Arsenal, and Manchester City lost our last 3, but we have won our last 2 now, got 2 clean sheets in a row against Everton and Crystal Palace. And if we want to fight Europa League, we had to beat them both. And the coming games now, we've got West Ham, Bournemouth, Chelsea, Forest. We have to win these games if we want to try and fight for that top 7.
Well, you have got a run where you can break into that, really, and it's a favourable run, albeit after seeing what we did at the Emirates. How confident are you playing this Bournemouth side? Albeit, Banny, do you think against Aston Villa, do you think we would set up the same way as we did against Arsenal, or do you think we're going to change that?
I hope you change that, Craig, because Aston Villa, if you take a look tactically, and Bailey will confirm this with me. They also like to play a 4-4-2, where at least with that more robust formation, you get the combination of defensive solidity, you get a tight midfield, and also you have two strikers up front in Bailey and Watkins who can certainly run the channels and be quite threatening. The biggest problem with having five at the back is that sometimes when it works quite well, but other times, you have a situation where players can get in each other's way. It can look a little bit clumsy. And I was actually hoping, as I said earlier to you, that that Mepham wouldn't be playing, that it would be Stevens in that back four alongside Senesi and Zamora and Adam Smith. And maybe it could very well be a case that either Mepham or Stevens would have to be sacrificed, because Aston Villa do take some decent set pieces themselves. So it will have to be that Mepham makes way, and at least that way you can at least look to try and pack that midfield and make it work really well, and have two target men up front. So with a 4-4-2 on one side and a 4-4-2 on another, you could see a lot of interesting clashes, as it were. At least you'd be setting up more to try and take the game to Villa, as opposed to, just sitting back and allowing them to counter. Now you can't afford to sit back. And that goal you scored against us, I was about to say, was really, an example of the midfield working really well, because, again, you caught us cold. So we had a weakness at left back that day. We can possibly speak to Bailey. I was mentioning that, Unai Emery has been sort of trying to sort of switch around his two left backs. It would be Alex Moreno one game and Lucas Digne in another. And although Moreno does have some talent, I think he might need to improve his consistency a bit. And Bailey can tell you that he doesn't really rate the former Everton left back Lucas Digne either. So they may be in the market for a new left back sometime this summer, and maybe one of those two could be sent out on loan. So you're going to have to look to try to attack that channel quite well. Matty Cash is a top quality right back, so right back wouldn't be going down the left might not be the best option, but I wouldn't necessarily say that you should try to repeat that training ground move. But if you can attack their left side, maybe they could. Maybe that could be a possible opening for you. Maybe Bailey can try and provide some more insight to that if he can. Maybe.
Yeah, definitely. Just very quickly before we jump onto that, Bailey. The other Harrison has just commented, at the end of the day, I'm very proud of all the boys yesterday who were on that pitch. They played as they were told to play. Our two goals were top class. We sat back for the rest and did not attack more when we should have. That's not the players' fault. It's down to the management of how they were told to play. I understand defensive, but but you can have an attack a little more. We were threatening and scared Arsenal, especially at 2-0 up. What an atmosphere Arsenal have in the ground. Shame they only started cheering properly at 2-2. That's an interesting one.
I did hear, mind you, that after Partey scored, they started singing that ridiculous song about how Super Mick Arteta knew exactly what he needs. Let me tell you, mate, there are several Arsenal fans like myself who despise that song with a passion. But at half time, it was you could hear a pin hit the ground. It was that silence. So I think Sam has said it perfectly. There is a lot to be proud of with the boys. And maybe if the management had been a little bit more proactive in making that substitution, bringing Jadon Anthony on after Senesi scored, things could have been a little bit different. And that's just another example of how sometimes as a manager, you've got to be willing to stand up and do what you need to do at that moment itself. It's like they say in London, if shy people don't get sweets. If you want to get your sweets, you've got to stand up and get it and demand it and make it happen. And that's something that Gary O'Neill will learn.
And apologies, everybody, for my awful reading. Of that. Yes, it was very, very disjointed, to be honest. So sorry, Sam. I'm sure people were just reading it along and just not listening to me. Probably best that way. Go on, Manny, as you said, do repeat the question again for Bailey that we were discussing.
Yeah, Bailey, if you're back, it's good to have you back. And we were talking a little bit about the possible tactical formation that Bournemouth should have and how tactically you're set up. What would you say are the team's strengths and weaknesses if you're there? Yeah, I think he's frozen a little bit, and he might
Yeah,
possibly be coming back in. We'll give him some time, basically. But
yeah, no problem.
yeah,
Yeah. So, of course, it'll be quite interesting to hear from Sam as well. If Sam, you're still with us, I'm sure you're probably watching. Gary O'Neill, or what do we do? Because me and Sam don't necessarily agree on Gary O'Neill, or didn't really. I was a little bit more towards getting rid of Gary O'Neill after the Brentford game, but I think now is too late, and I think he's actually you know, proved a couple of people wrong because yesterday was very, very good. Against Wolves was good, against Newcastle was good. So there is that, but now is just way too late. And I think if it had to happen, it had to happen after that Brentford game. Would you agree?
maybe that would have been the best time to do it. But there was also a part of me, Craig, that felt that having made the decision to invest in him and give him that contract, it really wouldn't have been. It would have been tragic, and it would have been almost a case of suicide in a way if you were to part ways with him. Now, there are a lot of people at Chelsea who have made it crystal clear that they don't want to see um, Graham Potter over there, and if he never sets foot on the field at Stamford Bridge again, it will be too soon. But the board have also made it clear, only just, mind you, that we've signed him and he's there for the long haul. And Bailey will be coming back in a few minutes, but.
Excellent.
Yeah, so they made it crystal clear that they have to support him. And I think with O'Neill, you also have to ask yourselves a question. If you were to get rid of him, who could possibly come in with this seemingly closed shop of managers and do as good a job as O'Neill was able to do after getting rid of getting rid of Scott Parker? Because listen, there was a time, mate, when you lot were actually comfortably mid-table, threatening to crack the top half. It was just a shame how there was that slump, and a little bit like Brendan Rodgers at Leicester, there's that slump now, which has sort of pulled them back into something like near the abyss. And although Leicester, I think, should have enough about them to stay up anyway, there's always going to be that part of me that feels, with Bournemouth, there'll be so many what might have beens, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I really don't want them to have this season, after everything that has happened and the wonderful storylines that have come along with it, end up, just failing to make it. And even there are some other teams like Leeds and even Wolves, mind you, who I can't really see staying up without an almighty struggle. And even Everton, although they have records of being able to, they have a good record of being able to stay up eventually and overcome struggle. With every single year that goes by, you just think, all records have to be broken, and Bailey is back.
Hello again, Bailey. You all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a very quick one, actually, because what I wanted to do before we jump back into our previous question for Bailey was because you mentioned Scott Parker there, and this is a bit from Talksport, if you can see. Scott Parker's not in a good place because after a 3-0 defeat to a relegation contenders that went wrong everywhere. It seems like Scott's struggling, isn't he?
Yep, he is. I was surprised. To be honest, I never even knew that he was able to get a job over there, because Club Brugge, of course, are, in addition to one of the Belgian league's top clubs, are also in the Champions League themselves.
Yeah.
I never even paid any attention to that whatsoever. But I guess it's a question of Parker being the sort of person who might not really be suited for management, because he just doesn't seem to me to be that sort of person who can really inspire players to play for him. He was a
Mhm.
hard-working player in his day, and I think the disappointment of not being able to go further at Chelsea and not doing too much more with England than he did has sort of spurred him in many ways to try and do more than he possibly could. He still had a
Yeah.
more than decent career playing for several Premiership clubs, ending his career, of course, with Fulham, where of course he began his managerial career.
Mhm.
I was shocked when I found out that he took the manager's job at Club Bruges, but I just think that maybe he needs to learn a little bit more about how to relax a little bit, how to not be so intense. And players don't really respond to managers who aren't really that positive. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah,
think Bailey can
completely
tell
agree.
you that there might have been times when, you know, given Gerrard's career as a manager, he seemed to be a little bit maybe too intense for the players' liking, and never really was able to find that balance between asking the players to perform for him and also giving them the understanding and the arm around the shoulder that they would need after a
Mhm.
bad result. And I think that can segue back to Bailey, and you can ask him your question then.
Yeah. As you may, well, of course, Scott Parker. I think he was great in the Championship. He managed to get Fulham out the Championship as well. But look at what Mitrovic has done, and he didn't utilise him. So, yeah. Um, as we were saying, Bailey, and thank you for coming back on. Of course, we've been playing five at the back. Now, I would envisage against Aston Villa, we will set up differently to how we have against Arsenal. And I think we'll probably go with a 4-4-1-1 with Hamid Traore just behind Dominic Solanke. You know, firstly, but based on how Aston Villa set up, you know, what would you say are the strengths and weaknesses? And do you think you would be able to cope with that sort of formation? And where could we effectively have luck?
Yeah, of course. The only thing about Bournemouth, of course, you just need to attack us, because if you attack us, you're going to press us. Because against Crystal Palace, of course, yesterday, we were just passing it back. It was just such a boring game. And it was only one goal in it, and that was because of our own goal. If it wasn't for our own goal, then it would have been a 0-0. But if you attack us, I think you'll press you you'll press to us, because we've got, of course, not good centre backs. Of course, I say Minks has been solid this season. Ezri
Mhm.
Konsa, struggling. I can't wait till Carlos back. He might be back for your game. If that a bit nervous for you. But yeah. I think, of course, you might go like you said, five at back. You went with. I think you might change it against Aston Villa, of course. Um, of course, we will. It depends how we go with though. It depends how strong we go now, because we've got the best midfielder out, Kamara. He
Mhm.
could be out for like the season now. And he only signed this season, and he has been our best player in that midfield. Um, I would love to see Duran start against you. I think
Mhm.
he has been really good. But our weakest I'll start with Bournemouth weakest.
Yeah.
For your weaker, I don't know, it's tough, because I know you've got solid players, like you've got Billing. I think he's a
Mhm.
cracking player. You've got Solanke up top. Kiefer Moore is a solid player as well. Um, your weakest is actually tough.
I know
Let me.
exactly what it is.
I if I go with maybe your midfield,
Mhm.
I'll probably go the new signing from Blackburn. I think it's Rothwell. I think he signed from Blackburn.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think he's probably weakest in defence. I'll probably go. I'm. Uh, I'll probably go Adam Smith. I don't
Mm,
think he is a Premier League player in my opinion. I think he could be like a Championship player, not a League One player, but I think he's like a Championship player.
mhm.
But yeah, of course, our weakest, well, your strongest, I think it will be, of course, like I said, Billings, Solanke,
Yeah.
Kiefer Moore if he starts. But for our weakest, I think last couple of games, I think Jacob Ramsey. I think only one
Mhm.
player, and probably Esri Konsa. Um, and uh, our best players. John McGinn, you need to watch out for him. Man of the
Mhm.
match the last 2 games. He is just a solid player. Matty Cash, you need to watch out. I think Alex Moreno, if he starts Lucas Digne against you, I know it's you. I
Mhm.
know it's Bournemouth who are down there, but you can't start Lucas Digne against this one of these teams because because that could punish her. To be honest, on that game, I can see you beating us. I'm that guy what ain't positive, but positive at the same time for some games. Um, like if we play a hard game, I'm positive because Villa beat hard teams, but we can lose against like a Bournemouth, Everton sometimes. I know we always beat Everton, but we could lose. We play well. Um, uh, who else? Leeds, of course.
Mhm.
Southampton. We only got over them. So yeah, I think that's a weakest and tougher, but it's going to be a strong game in a couple of weeks between Bournemouth and Villa, and I don't think we'll batter you. I think we'll batter, well not batter, but I think we should beat West Ham on Sunday as well. But
Oh, I
yeah,
hope so. I hope you can beat them because they're right in the mix with us. We'll wrap it up there, but of course, hopefully, fingers crossed, we've got two of the toughest games out the way. Of course, we've got Liverpool coming up. Didn't exactly look like it was going to be a tough game, but following the 7-0 thrashing of Manchester United, could well be. Unless they do what they have done all season, which is get a really good result and then blow the next game. Well, hopefully, fingers crossed. But Bailey, I'm sure we shall speak around the time that we play Aston Villa, which is only a couple of weeks away. But thank you so much for coming on the show, mate.
that's fine.
All right, I'll speak to you soon, mate. Take care.
Thanks.
And Manny, likewise, thank you again for coming on the show. I'm sure that we will be doing another video very, very soon with you. And I think we'll probably do a show where we're reviewing a lot more about the Premier League and, what's happened so far this season, what we need to do.
I'm looking forward to that, absolutely, mate. And of course, I had to come on, given that it was an Arsenal game, but also because now, thanks a lot to you, boys, I've sort of developed a huge soft corner for the Cherries. I mean, how can you not like cherries? They're sweet. but
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
yeah, so it was good to come back on. I've missed coming on here.
Mhm.
It's always very relaxing, and we can have these more measured discussions, as it were. And all I can say is this is now. It's sort of it's at that stage now where it's now or never, as Alfie Boe would so memorably sing. Of course, it was an Elvis Presley cover. I know that, but
Yeah.
you know, this is now a time where hopefully Gary will just sit his players down and say, "Listen, boys, we know that we are better than our results would indicate, and it's now up to us to really show that, and it's now up to me to try to pull my weight as a manager." And he really needs now to analyze everything really well and say, you know what? If the back five isn't working, we've got to stick to a back four, be a little bit more aggressive, and we will see where that leads us. And I know that Liverpool will be daunting, but hope will always spring eternal.
Yeah,
Take that into consideration.
definitely, mate. Definitely. Well, thank you for coming on again, mate. And
Always.
we will be in contact very, very soon, I'm sure, and
Yes,
be
we will.
doing a show hopefully midweek sometime.
Maybe. I'm looking forward to that. Of
Awesome
course,
stuff.
midweek will certainly see the return of Europa League action, and we will be playing our first match against the Portuguese side, Sporting. So that should be interesting indeed. But again, now you know the drill. You call, I come running.
Awesome stuff, mate. Well, thank you again, Manny, and no doubt we'll catch up with you later on this week.
Definitely. Thanks, mate.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us on this show. Remember, hit the like, the subscribe, the bell button, everything below as well. Leave some comments, agree, disagree, you tell us. But until next one, up the cherries, and we will see you very, very soon.